Okay, hello everybody, and welcome back to day 4 of learning HTML. My name is Derry, and I'm going to be teaching you guys HTML. So let's just get started. So I guess just as a refresher for last camp, day 3, we covered HTML links and creating our own hyperlinks in HTML. So creating things like clickable images and clickable text that can take us to other web pages and websites. And yeah, today we're just going to continue learning more tags. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on creating HTML tables. So let's get started. So what is an HTML table? An HTML table is just a table written in HTML. A table is a type of data arrangement. If you're not familiar with tables at all, by arrangement of data, you can compare it to something like a bar graph or pie charts. Maybe in school you were asked like graph data, that you're using an arrangement of data to do that. So tables are another way you can arrange your data and display it for others to view. So tables are widely used in communication, research, and data analysis. And there are many different ways to display data, as I've already mentioned, like pie charts, bar graphs, scatter plots, just a lot of ways to display data. But tables are just one of the more straightforward, and they're very popular. So what is data analysis? Because that kind of sounds like a tricky word. So if you're not familiar with the meaning of these pair of words, pretty much you can translate data, anything that's data, to being information. And then analysis is basically can be translated to an investigation. So it's an information investigation. So you're seeing information that you've collected and you're looking more deep into it to see if you can get any meaning out of it. So the main purpose of data analysis is to look at what data collected is trying to tell us. So what are HTML tables used for? HTML tables are specifically used for displaying data through tables in a web browser. And it makes sense to use a table in HTML when you want to organize data that would best look in a spreadsheet. There are things that shouldn't be arranged in a tabular format simply because it wouldn't make any sense. So it's important to know how to actually use tables first before you start creating them. So if you're not familiar with spreadsheets either, they're pretty much an application where you can arrange data as well. So Google Spreadsheets is really popular. That one's online. And then there's also Microsoft Excel. Those are two popular ones from what I know. So going back to HTML tables. So first of all, like all tables, HTML tables are also organized into rows and columns. So if we're not familiar with rows and columns too well, or mix up one of the two, rows go horizontally and columns go vertically like this. So examples of rows and columns, we have chairs seated, maybe at a church or any event where they have chairs usually, and a movie theater as well. The chairs are usually organized into rows and columns. So yeah. So here's an example of a good looking table. This table, it has a title at the top over here, study time versus grades. So that kind of tells us it's comparing study time against grades. And yeah, what we can do is that we can analyze this data. So we can do data analysis and we can look to see if this data has any meaning behind it. So just looking now, these are titles for each column on the table. So student, study time, and grade. And this has all the names, this has all the hours, and this has all the grades it looks like. And yeah, let's try to see if we can pull any information out of it. So first I'm gonna look for like the highest and lowest grades. It's just a way I'm going to go out to do this. So it looks like the highest grade was a 94, and the person who got it studied for 5 hours. But I don't think the name really matters too much to us because the name doesn't define what type of grade you're gonna get or study time. So 94 hours for the highest study time as well, it looks like, so 5 hours. Somebody else also studied for 5 hours and they got a grade of 92. And that's pretty good as well. So somebody studied for 4 hours and they were able to get a 93, which is also really good. So let's look at who studied the least and what their grade was. Looks like Marissa studied for the least. Oh, sorry, I don't have a laser pointer. Let me turn that on so you can see what I'm doing. So anyways, looks like Marissa studied for the least amount of time, which was 1 hour, and she got a grade of 78, and that seems to be the lowest out of all these other grades. So basically, maybe we can come to the conclusion that the more you study for, the higher grade you're going to get from looking at Thomas and Cindy. So This is just an example of data. Honestly, right now we're not too much focusing on analyzing data. We just want to be able to put data down onto a table and have it display on our web browser. So yeah, once again, the rows are going horizontally like this, and then the columns are going vertically. So there's 3 columns here. And yeah, of course, as you probably noticed, this table is pretty easy to analyze. One, because there wasn't too much data, but also because there were very good titles and everything was organized perfectly into rows and columns. It was very easy to divide things off. So I could see the names split off, I could see the hours split off, and just all aligned perfectly. So this is what a good table looks like. It's very easy to understand, very easy to read. And yeah. So let's look at a bad table example. So I had to make one myself, so this one's pretty simple. But pretty much this is a bad table example. And of course, it's because it's not organized into rows and columns. In fact, you might not even be able to call this a table. So this table is difficult to understand and it does not convey a conclusion to the viewer fast enough. So you can't really analyze this. You have to go out of your way to go count everything. And it doesn't even line up with the titles either, so you don't know what to call them. So tables are, the whole point of tables is to organize data, so they want to be organized, and this is not organized. So this is it fixed. Now everything's organized into its rows and columns. We didn't put the lines here to represent the rows, but it is organized into rows and columns. And it's a lot easier to understand, and the viewer can more quickly make thoughts on the data. So hopefully that makes sense now on tables and what they kind of look like. You might be already familiar with them. So there are many unique styles of tables, things that like exist. For example, like in class, you may have seen like a multiplication table up on a wall before, and pretty much you can use it to do everything up to the 12 times table. And yes, it's like more of a unique style of a table because this is not normally built. You usually see like headings and columns, right? We still have our rows and columns here, but it's being used differently. The rows aren't necessarily being used for titles. The top row is not necessarily being used for titles. But yeah, this is a multiplication table, but this is actually still a table, just that you can do some cool things with it, I guess. So like we can do 9 and then match it up with this 9. You can see that 9 times 9 is 81. And yeah, we can do with pretty much everything up to 12. So here's a real world example of a table, one you probably see more often. This is a calendar. So calendar also is usually in the form of a table. So top row, or besides title, the top row is like all the days of the week. So Sunday, Monday to Saturday. And then we have our days, and that's organized into rows and columns as well. So this is also somewhat unique because we're using it differently from just looking at data. But actually, technically, we could say this is just a normal table as well because we have our days, and maybe in one of these days we'd fill out with data, if that makes sense. So this is a table. So let's get on to creating our own tables now. So we use the table tag to define a table in HTML. So pretty much that surrounds everything that goes into your table. If you're having multiple tables, you're going to have multiple table tags. And the basic elements that make up a table in HTML are the th tag, the td tag, and the tr tag. And the table tag is a block element, by the way. So a block element is any element that starts a new line and uses the full width of the page by default. So this might be kind of tricky to understand, but we're going to explain this later. Some of the elements we've used already are actually block elements. But yeah, so block elements are just a characteristic of elements. And yeah, we have the opposite of that as well, which we'll talk about afterwards. So once again, it's an element or that starts a new line and it takes up the full width of the line by default. So it doesn't share the line with other elements and it likes to take it for itself, but you can change that using something else. A block element can take up one line or multiple lines and has a line break before and after the element. So now let's look at inline elements. An inline element is the opposite of a block element, and an inline element is an element that is able to have multiple elements on the same line by default. So the inline element is able to share the same line. When I say line, I kind of mean like, I basically actually do mean line. So that same like top of the page, maybe you could place an element, it's going to share that like top left with another element, and it can fit multiple elements on the same line. And a block element, even though it doesn't like actually look like it takes up the full width, it will take up the full width of that line by default. So here's a better example of how it looks like. So first off, the H1 tag and the P tag, those are both block elements. You may have noticed that when we put those two tags together, the P tag goes on a new line and the H1 tag also goes on its own line. And yeah, so as you can see, they took the full lines represented with these colors as well, and they don't share anything with the page width. And then inline elements, on the other hand, are able to take up multiple things on the same line. So the EM tag is an inline element. That's just an example. But yeah, these share the line together. And then once the line's filled up, it would go on to the next line to start sharing again. So those are inline elements and block elements. So the table tag is a block level element. So we use the tr tag to define a table row in HTML. So this is another tag we're talking about. And yeah, the tr tag. So the way to memorize it is with the T and R. So the T is for table and the R is for row. And yeah, so in this picture, for example, we have 3 rows. And then you can expect in our HTML code for the table, we're going to have the tr tag opening and closing 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. So those define each of the rows. So we don't need to put anything with it. We just make those rows exist so they can be separated. Now what's important afterwards is that we put our data in correctly. Incorrectly, not incorrectly. So yeah, the th tag is used to define a table header. So the table header is usually in our top row, right? So we want to pay attention to that. And then pretty much actually what it does is that just bolds the text. So maybe if you have like a piece of data that you just want to be highlighted to show a trend or just anything else, a unique piece of data, you could also use the th tag to make that stand out more. But yeah, pretty much it's just always used for the header, and it makes it stand out a little bit more than the rest. So in the picture to our right, our table has the headings pointy, flat, and wet. And then we can see in that first table row we made, so tr tag, in between that now we created each of these headings, so pointy, flat, and wet. And we use the th tag to do that. So next we're going to be looking at how we can just put in normal data to our table. So once again, this can be sorted as table header now because it's th. So the td tag now. So we use the td tag to define a table cell within HTML. So when I say cell, I mean these things over here, but I also just mean table data. So the actual data that's going into the table now. So this can be table data. Maybe I shouldn't have used the word cell here. But yeah, so this is just your data, and you want to make sure it matches up with what goes under it. So in this case now, in the picture to the right, without counting the table, we have 6 data cells, or 6 pieces of data, I guess. Let's call it data cells. So down here now, you can see in our code, we have multiple as well. So we have 6 as well here. So it's not going to be in our first TR. It's not going to be in our first row because these were our headings. But in our next TR tag that opens and closes, then we have our TD tag appearing with all the data. And we also have one more row, and then we see that again. So hopefully that's clear on the tags and we use for creating tables. So here's just something I want to touch on before we go actually start practicing ourselves. I know we've been in this presentation for a little bit. Let's just keep going a little bit longer. So here's some basic HTML code. Let's break it down quickly. So opening table tag, because the table tag defines the whole table itself. Then we have our opening tr tag to create our first row. And then we're using the th tag a couple times to put some headings for that first row. And we're closing it off again. Then we have our tr tag for our second row. We have Bob and yellow as our 2 pieces of data together. So Bob's going under their name, yellow's going under favorite color. And then that closes again for that row. Then we open the next row, and then we have, I guess, more data. So we have Michelle and purple, which goes into that next row with the TD tags being used twice, of course, and then it closes with the TR tag again. And then we close our table completely that we had from start, like that. And here's what we expect to be outputted, right? We have name, favorite color, both bolded because we put them as th as headings. And we have our 2 pieces of data like that. But here's our actual web browser output. So we have name, we have favorite color, we have Bob, we have yellow, we have Michelle, we have purple. And this will actually be our output if we try doing it like this. So first of all, let's use our knowledge on creating tables, and let's try creating one right now. So I have Learn Code Playground open. We're going to write some basic code for a table. So our table goes in our body tag, of course, because it's content that we want the viewer to see. And yeah, so first we start off with creating the table tag. Table like that. Let me switch my keywords out actually, one sec. So we start with creating the table tag like that, and we start putting data into our table. So we want to create our rows. Let's say this table is only going to have 2 rows, meaning the tr tag is going to open only twice. So let's just put our closing tr tag, and then let's put another one, tr, and then tr like that. I don't know why that indented like that. We'll just go like that. Now let's put in some data here. So for the first row, once again, it's usually a heading that you put up here. So I'm going to use th to make a table heading so it's a little bit bolded and stands out. And then now I have to actually put it in text. So this will be favorite pet and name. So let's just say th name. Let's say closing th now. Or actually maybe it'll be the name of the animal if it's a pet name. Yeah, I'll say pet name, and I'll say animal. Like that. So that's in our first row now. Let's take our second row. Let's put in a bit of data. So it has to match up, of course, with our headings if we want it to be accurate. We can't put an animal and pet name. Anyways, I'll call this animal Spotty, and then it's going to be a dog. I put th on accident. I have to change that in a step, but it's a dog. I could be more specific, of course, but this is just a simple example. So td td, that should be d as well. Spotty and dog, pet name, animal, that looks good. And then we want to close off our table. I didn't do that yet, but let's just close off our table so we know that's the end of our table. So let's run this, and we see our output like this. We see pet name, we see animal, we see Spotty, we see dog. This isn't necessarily what I was talking about when I was talking about tables, right? I said it should be organized. But right now, as it is, we can kind of say this says pet name animal, and it says Spotty dog. Immediately, you won't know that these are 2 separate headings and that these are separated like that. So let's do this. We're going to go back to the presentation in a second, but I also want to show off inline and block elements again, since we talked about that as well. That's going to be important for the future if you want to style your web page and make it look nice. But yeah, let's do this. So for now, let's comment this out. Like that. Let's just comment this out. Remember the comment tag can be used to comment things out. So I'm just going to comment this out so it's not recognized by the browser. So it's pretty much like hidden now. And now let's just do an example with the p tag to show block elements. So I'm going to write hello 1, 2, 3 here. Maybe I should not use this keyboard. I'm talking a little bit slow. I'm going to switch it out again. So we're going to say hello 1, 2, 3 here, and then we're also going to say, we'll put it on the same line actually. I also want an h1 tag here that's going to say by 1, 2, 3. I need to put a slash like that. So if we run this now, we see our output, and that's strange, right? They're on opposite lines. The hello tag is, or hello 1, 2, 3, that's our p tag. It takes its own line, and the by 1, 2, 3 tag also takes its own line. So first of all, once again, it doesn't matter where we put our tags necessarily. It's going to be a block element or inline element no matter what. I put it opposite ways as well, like this. It still doesn't matter, because once again, with our tags, it doesn't matter where we place it in the document. As long as everything's working correctly, it's good. We usually want to keep it organized only for the reason that it's easier for us to understand and read. But we can have all the tags in the document on the same line if we'd want to. But yeah, if we run it like this now, just to switch out, prove my point, we see that they're still not sharing the same line, even though there's so much space down here, right? And you can already imagine what that's for. That's for because either the H1 element is a block element, it has a characteristic of that, or the P elements or a block element, or they're both block elements to begin with. So either just one of these has to be a block element, sorry, in order for this to happen. So yeah, they create new lines like that. So they put a line with before and after. So in order to get these to share the same line, if I really wanted to, I'd have to style it with CSS and change some properties of it. But yeah, by default, this is the case. These are block elements. So you can imagine an inline element. It will share the line with the element, if that makes sense. But yeah, let's head back to our presentation. Let's continue on. So I need to go here like that. So yeah, back to this example when we said we were getting a table output. It's because if we do not specify a border for the table, it will be displayed without borders. So to fix this, we're going to do a simple solution for now. We can do a lot more to make this look a lot nicer, but we're just going to do a simple solution because this is a main topic for next camp. And it's pretty in-depth and can get kind of complicated. So we're just going to do a simple thing for now. And pretty much what we're going to do is use a attribute called style. And the style attribute is one of those universal attributes I was talking about that can be used on any tag. And yeah, the style attribute is used to define style information for specific elements within our HTML code. So it doesn't necessarily have to be done this way, the style attribute. There are other ways we can do this, but for now, this is the way we're going to do. So when making your own tables, just for now until we learn CSS next camp and we are able to do a lot more and style other things as well, please put this code in between the head elements. So we're going to go like this. So I guess that last slide was correct. We're not using the style attribute. It looks like we're using the style tags here. So yeah, next class we will thoroughly discuss styling and CSS. And CSS is pretty much what we use for styling, to put it short. But yeah, hopefully that is clear. So once we add it in, we see that we now get borders for our table, and that's pretty much it. So let's try doing that. 1 second, I need to, okay, I'll do that later actually. Let's go like this. Okay, so I'll put this over here and then I'll open this back up. So let's get our table back here. So I'm going to delete this example I had with I'm going to go back full screen. I'm going to go like that. So by the way, let me look at chat quickly. I haven't looked at all. If there are any questions throughout this entire thing, you can put your questions in chat and I'll reply. But anyways, this is what was the table we had. And now let's give it some style information. So pretty much what you're doing looks like this. So you guys can pretty much just write this exactly as I write it for now because this is what we're learning for now. So style, opening style tag. Then we have to put what we're styling. So the element names table th. I think we're also styling td. Let me make sure you have td. Then we put opening curly brackets, or not curly brackets, whatever. I think they actually are called curly brackets. And we put border colon 1 px. Px is short for pixel, and then solid black. And we put a semicolon after that. So I'm going to go like this, put a closing tag, just move this one down as well like that. So pretty much with this piece of code right here, what we did is that we just styled some elements specifically, and in this case we styled the table element, the th element, and the td element, and we added a border that was 1 pixel in wide and it was solid black. So yeah, hopefully that's clear. So that's what this code does. We'll be getting on next camp like this, like how this is written and how we can do this for other elements. How we can style other things like the color, the background, how we can alter something from being an inline element to a block element, and all of that stuff next camp. But for now, you just need to know this is the code we're going to use to add a border. This is the style code we're going to use, the CSS we're going to use. So let's run this, and we see we now have a border for our information. So pretty simple. I think depending on your web browser, if you're using a different web browser, for me, I'm using Firefox right now, but if you're using something else, the border of the table may look a little bit different. And that also goes for some of the other stuff we've learned. Just might look slightly different, but it'll basically be the same thing and it will have the same function. So yeah, just an example, let's add one more piece of information, or actually let's add two. So in this case, I'm just going to copy and paste these rows we have. I'm just going to change this up a bit. So I'm going to say this one's going to be called uh, ice cream, and I'll say this is a cat. And I'll say this last one's going to be called what's a dog? Or no, I'll do George, and that'll be a monkey. George. Next a monkey. I might have spelled George miscorrectly. I'm not too sure. But let's run that. We see Spotty Dog, ice cream is a cat, and George is a monkey. So this is not really useful data unless if you're trying to maybe see what people normally call their pets, depending on the animal. But yeah. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully tables make sense. So I think we're actually getting near wrapping up. And yeah, so it looks like we're wrapping up for this camp. Let me get back on the slides. So it was a shorter camp today, but we covered all the information and I didn't get any questions. But yeah, let me drag this over here. So yeah, it looks like we're wrapping up the camp today for creating tables. Of course, in our tables, actually, let me show this off on as well. So of course in our tables, it doesn't need to be the table data we add, doesn't have to be just text like this. It can be links, it can be a lot of different things. We can create calendars. And yeah, so I can add a link here. I can use the A tag to do that. And yeah, so it can be pretty much anything we put here with our table. We can have a lot more columns and a lot more rows, of course. If we want to add more columns, we simply just add another th tag or another td tag that would create a new column. We can just see that right now as well. I'll just go th. I'll say this is test. I'll put a closing th. You also need this a tag that I have for no reason, and I'll say this one will say dog, right? So we run this, and we see we created a new. Oh, sorry, hold up. Let me actually fix this as well. Tag new here. Run this now. So yeah, we see we created a new column just because we added something to our first row again, or we could do with pretty much any row. But yeah, so those are pretty much tables. It's a lot simpler, but these are something that can be very, very, very useful. You see tables being used a lot to do other things as well. But yeah, so hopefully that's clear on how we use tables, what tables are used for, how we can analyze data, how we want them to be organized, and how to create them in HTML. So to maybe put a p tag with it, just to show you that the p tag is a block element, I can write something like hello here. You see that's going to go on its own line like that because they are both block elements, or at least just one of them is a block element. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense and hopefully that's clear. And yeah, next camp we're going to be learning about styling what we've learned so far, so we can make our web page look a lot nicer. I think we're also not going to be working in Solar next camp. I'm going to work in a text editor, and I'll show you guys how to get a text editor the camp after that. But for now, that's pretty much it. I know once again it was a shorter camp, but yeah. So thank you for joining me. I hope you were able to learn something new. I didn't get any questions this camp, I believe. But if you have any questions about this camp, you can ask me them in the next camp if you show up there. And yeah, so I'll talk to you later. So thank you for joining me, and bye.